recording. So, everybody.
Yes. Should I start?
No, I'm going to open up.
Okay.
So, dear professional, ladies and gentlemen and participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know which part of the world are you going to join. We are very excited today that we have Professor Brigadier Nuzhat Mushahid, and I always start and compliment and introduce her with the slogan that one woman make the difference. So Dr. Danish is around. Dr. Danish, will you kindly introduce Professor Nuzhat, or I should continue? Danish?
Dr. Sahab, you can continue.
Okay. So one woman make the difference. So she stood firmly, to move on the quality of blood transfusion, which is one of the most important intervention in medical healthcare delivery. And we are very lucky. And when I visited Pakistan, I had many time interaction with her. And when she was in service, I like her very, very strong approach and viewpoint. She's really phenomenal. So I will request Dr. Nuzhat to introduce to all the participants in more detail. Professor Nuzhat, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear APPNA members and participants of this webinar, Assalamu alaikum and good evening from Pakistan. You are very kind. I'm very thankful for your kind words. My background is mostly I qualified as from Arimal College after my undergraduation. I started off pursuing the careers in pathology, and I then selected hematology as my field. And then armed forces decided that they needed somebody to be trained in blood transfusion. So they sent me to both USA and UK at that time. So after I returned, I had a privilege of serving in Armed Forces Institute of Transfusion, which is a premier institute of armed forces. And it has it was one of the oldest institution and largest institution, most developed institution. Back in 1960s, it got the status of institute, and it was something to which whole of the country looked up to. So I had the privilege to serve there 3 times, and I tried to do my best, and to few achievements or the legacy that I left was that I fought tooth and nail for uniform standards of blood transfusion safety across the country. And I have been advocating this cause at every forum, every place. And not that it was, since I was responsible for armed forces, that was the arena where I worked for most of the time. But once I retired in 2019, I decided to take up the cause and make my canvas wider, both from this viewpoint that now I would be able to advocate this cause, not only for the public sector, but private sector, and involved in teaching and training wherever possible. So with this vision, I made up this organization, which I'll allude to in the last slide, how it fits in whole of the scenario, which I am going to give an overview to the audience. And I'll not be going into many details, because every detail would be needing a separate presentation itself. But I'll give you enough background and country's position so that you can appreciate the existing situation, the gaps and opportunities, and potential collaboration areas. That is actually primary aim of bringing speakers from country to present on this forum. So moving on to, I have no relevant financial and non-financial relationship. Now, if we look at historically the development and evolution of the blood transfusion, it can be conveniently divided between a watershed of Second World War. Before that time, we'll call it pre-modern area. And this is a modern era after Second World War. There's a long history of myths and taboos and primitive science and some groundbreaking discoveries in this pre-modern era. We'll not talk about the details. However, the modern era there are certain key developments that happened in this, and one of those was after discovery of Australia antigen, the transfusion transmitted in viral screening started developing. And then there was this AIDS crisis of early 80s that once it threatened the blood supply, it eroded the public confidence and trust in governments to handle public health issues. So blood transfusion and related industries owe their developments to discoveries and developments and the pressure of the regulators, and finally coming to a precautionary principle, which meant that this is one of those industries where precautionary principle meant that you would go for an intervention even if the evidence is not there. So because of all the historical background that I just alluded to. So universal leukodepletion is one of those examples of precautionary principle. Anyhow, the technological development has tremendously contributed to offering solutions to the safety of blood. Last decade has also seen introduction of structured collection of data on hazards of blood transfusion, learning lessons, and mitigating the risk as the only means of minimizing the harmful and effects of this biological product, what we have named as hemovigilance. Those interested in history probably can reconstruct the nature of crisis that AIDS brought to the conscience of all the stakeholders. It shaped the way the blood transfusion safety is perceived. The sector has all targeted zero risk for a long time as its ultimate goal. And therefore, all the stakeholders have to look at hard facts and questions. For example, what we know about is that blood is a biological product and the only source are the humans. It's a life-saving, essential, high-risk medicine. Its safety is a matter of public health. At meeting the need of patient is responsibility of the state, and state has to ask the society to make this resource available for the patients. So what the governments and the states are challenged with is to find a most cost-effective and efficient model to ensure safety, availability, efficacy, utilization, and sustainability of the source. So it also meant to restore public confidence in public health, which was eroded, as I said, because of the AIDS epidemic. So we have to strike a balance and try to find out a sort of way of delivering this service. So thanks to the international attention and presence of international institutions and developments, of course, the blood transfusion has been organized and modeled as an industry. This made sense because this is the only field, one of those in medical, where you are dealing with the products rather than only the services. So the model that is highlighted here has evolved with experience and practice and has established itself to be the best model to organize the blood banking and blood transfusion services in a country. This is, to me, a foremost critical area as far as states and governments are concerned. It is, however, up to the state to take the responsibility for provision of the service itself, or delegate this service to some credible organization and exercise strict oversight and regulation. Just it happens in USA, where most of the blood services are are managed by Red Cross. Similarly, in Turkey, Red Crescent is the one service which is managing this transfusion services whole across the country. So all sort of dangerous models would evolve if this model is not implemented, and there is growth simultaneously going on in the other healthcare facilities are being developed, which are highly dependent on this intervention. And I'll shortly show you that how it has happened in our country. Pakistan inherited 4 blood banks in these places. And at the time of independence in public sector, armed forces were, however, well organized and consistently followed the development agenda. And therefore, they were able to develop a center of excellence in northern part of the country, which we called as Armed Forces Institute of Transfusion. It became institute in 60s, while there was stagnation of, rather there was no development in public sector in this sector. This is just 4 slides showing that they have done a tremendous job, and still it's a tertiary care and a center of excellence for everyone, and it's a center for training for so many students who undertake FCPS Part 2 qualification in Pakistan. So they had a well-developed screening, and they are on the standard of care, which is comparable to any European or American standard, because they are doing NAT testing in addition to CLIA testing. So how did the rest of the country evolve in blood banking and transfusion medicine? It evolved into a demand-driven, fragmented blood transfusion system, so where the services are provided by varied sort of sectors like public, non-governmental organization, private hospitals-based blood banks, and standalone facilities. And currently it is projected that probably we are collecting 3 million blood donations annually from approximately 650 blood banks across the country. And this data has been compiled mostly by after Safe Blood Transfusion program was initiated. And I think a lot of work was done by Dr. Hassan Abbas and his team to collect this data. There's an unknown number of hospitals who are providing undocumented services. There's a rampant pilferage of blood, especially from large public sector establishment. And the way it is dealt and delivered is a highly hazardous and daily, at least it comes to my knowledge, what has happened. So mostly the blood banks are managed by diploma holders and medical officer and pathologists without any relevant qualification. And obviously the relevant qualifications were not made available. It is only lately that few universities have started embarking, and one of them is NUMS, which is decided to start off with the MS blood transfusion. Otherwise, the CPSP demands 6 months training from FCPS hematology graduates. Most of the blood bank technologists are on job training. Now, let me draw my attention of the audience to another critical area which may not be considered as part of blood transfusion. The way the blood banking has evolved today is due to this huge the quality and safety which is available right now is because of the heavy reliance on family and replacement donation, and there's lack of proper pre-donation screening of donors for high-risk behavior. And the most worrying thing is that there are rapid ICT kits that are used for TTI screening, and they're of questionable sensitivity because there's no mechanism at the level of government where they can be imported after pre-qualification of the quality. You can imagine the blood donor seroprevalence that has been reported is variably up to 8% for both B and C, depending upon the setting from which it is reported. And that sort of blood donor, because the population has a high prevalence of these diseases, so we expect the replacement of family donors would have also prevalence similar to this. Similarly, serologically, primitive practices are there. Only forward cross-matching is done, forward grouping is done, which is only on tiles. There's infrequent undocumented transfusion reactions, which do have morbidity and mortality, but again, it is not, the data is not formally collected. So I was saying that this is a critical area which contributed to the way the blood banking and blood transfusion services evolved in the country. And to me, it's a humanitarian crisis of utmost proportion. It's estimated that 1/4 of the national annual blood collection is transfused to thalassemia major patient. And they unfortunately have a limited access to proper healthcare. And we even don't know the exact number, but unofficial statistics or the one which NGOs have been reporting, and the number of NGOs there is probably we have more than 100,000 thalassemia major children across the country. Alone, KPK alone harbors about 50,000 of these children. And every child would probably need from 12 to 16 units of red cell each year. And if you have 100,000 of these children in the country, you can imagine 1.6 million units per year are needed, which is more than half of the blood which is being collected across the country. Still, they are far from the ideal care, as I said, and they are mostly die in their teens, and they go through a tremendous morbidity. What has happened over the time is because of the involvement of the NGOs in this service delivery for thalassemia major, because the state didn't at that time actually envisage the problem and didn't do any, there was no policy. And still only a couple of provinces have stated the policy, and only Punjab is running the program. So these NGOs did sensitize the society to the plight of thalassemia. And most of the society, the volunteers are coming and donating blood for thalassemics. But this blood is suboptimally utilized in a way that components are not prepared, because these NGOs are very poorly funded places. It's just out of desperation that they're delivering the service. So the direction, the volunteers who are donating blood, actually the cost is being borne by one another sector, and that is the obstetrical hemorrhages and emergency care, who do not have access to volunteer blood. And you can see, as I was saying, the plight of these thalassemics. They have high prevalence of these hepatitis C and hepatitis B, and these are one of those morbidities that leads to their demise. Okay, here is the maternal mortality for our country. As I was highlighting that volunteer blood is not accessible to these obstetrical patients, and the data from Sindh has disclosed that one collected from the rural area, that the maternal mortality is because of two reasons mostly: lack of access to surgical care, and secondly, lack of availability of blood in these emergency situations. So we are still average out, and they're better than before, but still a long way to go. And one of the reasons they are being deprived of emergency blood transfusion services. Finally, the reform was taken up in 2008, when initially, as Dr. Uzair was saying, it was initially in the AIDS control program. And this was like 62 years after independence of Pakistan through Pak-German joint project. And Ministry of Health established a blood transfusion program at national and provincial levels at independent entities. But with the advent of 18th Amendment and decentralization, it was a retrogressive for this program. But finally, Safe Blood Transfusion Authority was developed, and national blood policy was formulated, and strategic framework was for 2014 to 20 was released, documented. The strategic framework comprised of many critical areas for which work was started, and still a lot of ground has to be covered, especially at the grassroots level, where the blood banks need to commit to the safety, efficacy, and quality. And obviously the same holds true for the clinical services. They also need to show commitment to the safety and efficacy. The legislative framework was revisited as it had weaknesses in the initial drafts. And now by 2017, all of the provinces have a legislation. And as I said, the implementation was through the strategic framework. We'll look at what has happened so far with the financial cooperation component of the German government funded project was through the health management consultancy firm. Initially, government of Germany contributed about 15 million euros through the Bank of Germany. And this funding was for development of 10 regional blood centers, which were constructed in these geographical locations. And then again in phase 2, which was initiated in 2017, and it ended in December 2020. And now it is again additional 10 million euros was the grant given for development of the rest of the centers. Province-wise, it is also proposed that the hospital blood banks located in larger hospitals in phase 2 has to be upgraded to the position of regional centers. And these are the hospitals in these provinces that are to be upgraded in phase 2. What is the present status of these regional centers which have been developed, whole of the structure, and they have been equipped across the country is operational. Regional centers are 11, and under construction regional centers are shown in these areas. And finally, the total regional centers, blood centers that are to be constructed across the countries are total of 30. As far as Sindh is concerned, the Jamshoro is being managed in a private-public partnership by the Indus Hospital. Then Sakhar was given to Sakhar Blood Bank, again an NGO, and Fatmir Foundation is managing 2 of these centers in Sindh. This is a grand summary courtesy Dr. Sabah Jamal. According to her, 136 blood banks are collecting around 2 million blood in public sector in these places, and that's the ratio of grouping and cross-match being carried out by them. This is data from Punjab Blood Transfusion Authority. You can see as late as 2020, 80% of public sector blood is still being screened by rapid immunochromatic devices, and only 17% of these are, around 20% of these are being screened by ELISA and CLIA. Now, these are of questionable sensitivity. We know that the only places where WHO recommends ICT is probably primitive areas of Africa who have no access to any of these things. But this is, I'm talking of the province of Punjab, which is a better developed province. So the responsibility of implementation of transfusion safety lies with Institute of Blood Transfusion for both the regulation and implementation. This is data, as I said, previously I showed the data from which was kindly given by Dr. Sabah, who is the director of blood transfusion services at Indus Hospital. And she has done extremely commendable job in managing Bahawalpur and Multan regional centers in a private-public partnership model. And also they have quite a footprint in Sindh. Okay, WHO has reiterated the action framework for countries to advance the cause of blood transfusion safety, because there's a lot of room that still has to be covered. I've highlighted with the green the areas where our country has made a significant progress, and gray color indicates the missing data or no tangible, clearly stated data on these. And red areas mostly fall in the domain of clinical services. Like this is, I would say, proprietary structure, yes, with the funding of government, well coordinated, but sustainability is yet to be seen. Regulatory capacity, yes, they have improved a lot, and especially at least in Punjab Blood Transfusion Authority is doing a good job under management and leadership of a newly appointed head of this transfusion authority. Whether we know what quality we have, I've just highlighted that is quality cannot be ensured by using poor quality ICT testing, and majority of the blood transfusion being collected, blood donations collected are being screened by poor quality ICT. They are functioning, but whether efficiently managed, they have hit snags in places where it is being managed in public sector. So there are problems. The only efficient management that is being delivered is at the Multan and Bahawalpur Center because of the private-public partnership, and the Indus Hospital blood transfusion services are well experienced in delivering this service. There is no progress on blood management of patient on the clinical side, no surveillance, no hemovigilance, no pharmacological data. So this is missing completely. And this is the most difficult area because of the diversity of the clinical services and hospitals and healthcare facilities where these are actually transfused, in contrast to a specific area like blood banking, which is a very focused and narrow area. Okay, here I have tried to propose that if one were to choose few interventions that would contribute maximally to the safety and quality, then topmost would be a reliable transfusion-transmitted infection screening program, providing universal coverage to at least the public sector. And this we should not be ambitious, and we should look at minimum essential viruses or threats to which we should be screening, supported by the local evidence. One case in point would be that it is the malaria screening, because the standard that or criteria that is being followed by the developed countries is not applicable to our country, where we do have a high prevalence of malaria. So we cannot defer traveling only and then screening for antibodies. That is not applicable. And as far as PCR testing or molecular testing, that's not viable for us. So what we have to look at is what is the threat there and what cost we are going to do that. And while we have other more serious threats which are high prevalence areas, they should be cost effective and efficient and centralized. It should be sustainable, of course. Serological safety, again, we should look at a very minimum standard and ensure foremost the quality of reagents that are being used for serology. Standardized information management system can address a lot of present problems, and especially it can make every activity visible to the regulators, and that can go a long way in implementation of many quality initiatives. Resource sharing and preventing wastage, that can solve huge problem of patients everywhere in the country. This is not at all being done in any model anywhere. And we should have a reasonably trained HR. The shortest route that to address varied problems highlighted above is the use of uniform information management system. So blood establishment computer software is a medical device as it assists the patient management. Data structures, the vocabularies and nomenclature are all standardized to and have a common universal language for understanding and sharing of resources countrywide. 2 of the BECs are available in the country. One was developed by Zavia, and fortunately the other one was developed by my organization, P-Firstsolutions. We try to develop it in open source language of Linux so that it is easily affordable as compared to Zavia, which was developed, which is an Oracle-based system. So many of you appreciate that blood transfusion support is vital for achieving sustainable development goals, and especially the one which meets the standard of care. Also, with renewed interest in making all components available through massive transfusion protocols, the militaries have huge stakes in developing this area simultaneously. This source, which is basis, so they are working on it, and this has been brought a paradigm shift in the combat management. And many of the lessons learned can be actually are applicable to the civilian trauma as well. If we were to salvage the plasma, which can be a potential source to earn foreign exchange. And in fact, this, once we address the critical areas, then probably we can do a lot of public good by running a paid source plasma program as well. Now, looking at the holy grail of all this and the most thorny issue, that is about the costing of the blood. But as I say, that it is not always that money is the problem. It is more to do with the political will, management of resources, and setting the priorities. This slide highlights the sort of cost blood is available in one of the developed countries. And in transplant setting, this can go to as huge as $3,800 a unit. Even for low developed countries, it's not cheap. This is example of Zimbabwe. In 2010, WHO stated that probably you would need $30 to screen, to make a blood safe. But the costing at present has increased to more than $50 at least in our setting. And if we are to extrapolate, what does it mean as far as health budget is concerned? Our health budget in 2018 was $2.56 billion. And if the state was to ensure safety of 3 million blood units by taking the responsibility, and cost was incurred was $40, we would need $120 million a year. And that would translate to about 20 billion rupees. But at least if we are talking of public sector only, then 2 million are in public sector at this cost, that would mean $80 million a year and 13 billion rupees. They may argue that there's no additional fiscal space in the budget, but it is, as I said, subject to priorities. Public health is very neglected, it has no political benefits. International donor funding, especially the hepatitis prevention programs that are being internationally funded, has not been properly explored. There's a lot of opportunity there. Okay, the financing, possible financing models, I have stated here, and what is the situation at present. And I still feel that there can be some innovative model and which we can, that can work for our patients. None of public sector is only fully funded by the government. There's no partially funded by government entities. There's negligible reimbursement by insurers. There's partial reimbursement that is also non-existent. Baitul Mal, it does not fund for blood transfusion services, even if they fund for even a bone marrow transplant center. Non-profit organization charities, they only fund thalassemia and hemophilics mostly. Partially or funded by employer, a model exists in Fauji Foundation Hospital. And interestingly, in Sindh, when I visited their civil hospital, the blood bank is completely funded and managed by Dow alumni. And most of it in private healthcare is out-of-pocket funding. I still feel that insurance model can be evolved by some innovative technology solution. And that is one place where we can look into some innovative solutions. All stakeholders in safety and availability of blood need to be informed, educated, and mobilized to play their role. Especially important are the patient advocacy groups, which actually do not exist anywhere in the country for any case, except for probably hemophilia, and the professional societies. Pakistan Society of Hematology is especially very important, and it did effectively play a constructive role in the convalescent plasma controversy some time ago in early days of COVID pandemic, but it has not undertaken causes like not even thalassemia and not blood transfusion. Okay, the immediate attention is required to make a focused, concerted efforts to carry out transfusion-transmitted screening with reliable, sensitive screening technologies. And this should be led by a right leader at national and provincial, as a national provincial program managers. They should be given the right time, right resources, and then right questions should be asked them. WHO even says that if you don't have a right kind of person leading this program, you may not embark on the program at all. One can have open bids from the industry and private organization on the cost per donation basis for both the logistics, information management, and carrying out this TTI screening. For example, one center at northern, central, southern Punjab and geographically placed according to the rest of the provinces. In phase 2, this can, in fact, once you have this safety put in place and you have the information management system, then probably you can salvage the recovered plasma and then mobilize that funding from the cost of recovered plasma to fund the TTI screening. Complete outsourcing of each RCC and hospital blood bank to private-public partnership was a way forward, which was also pointed out last time when Dr. Shabanese was presenting. As I said, legislation and rules of blood insurance program should also be looked into, and maybe it can be mandated by the government for private insurers. There's a huge potential for and potentially collaboration areas on the front of technology, blood establishment computers, software and apps that can be helpful to the organization of and safety can be developed by the local talent, and their deployment and usage should be made mandatory for each blood center, and that even we have a capacity in our public sector in form of Punjab Information Technology Board. They have done few tremendous job in making few apps for other services. On job and skill-based training can be recognized, HEC, then production is one area where it can go a long way in bringing down the cost of blood transfusion services. Then I said that creating solutions which are potentially collaboration areas are recovered in source program, provided we have the right kind of legislation and can be outsourced to third parties industry. And then it can lead to contract fracturation and technology development, export and recovery of revenue, and plus industrial production of blood banks, and which can also be used for export. We at P-Firstsolutions envisage that to realize the big dreams, this is a very small effort. And we believe in the philosophy of its solution and systems and technology use, training and transparency. We also hope to engage other stakeholders to play their role in making this dream of blood transfusion safety, realize this dream. With this I thank you very much for the patience listening by the audience, and I hope that we would have constructive input. And now I will open for questions, receive questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Nuzhat. I think that's a very, very good presentation, very knowledgeable and very less talked about issue. I have so many questions and inputs, but before that, I think we are lucky we have Dr. Muhammad Tanvir, who is head of critical care unit at Dow University of Health Sciences. You mentioned that the alumni over there is funding for the screening and the safety of the blood. We would like to listen to him first. Dr. Muhammad Tanvir, would you like to share your experience from Dow University Critical Care Unit, please? Please unmute and, just, yes.
Yes. Is everybody is listening to me?
Yes.
Are you listening to me?
Yes, we are audible.
Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I'm very thankful to APPNA Merit. They have invited me for this program, and I'm lucky to hear Professor Nuzhat Salamat hearing her lecture, a wonderful lecture, and really she did a wonderful job. Few things I want to tell about me and my university. I did my graduation from Dow Medical College, and then I did FCPS in internal medicine, and I was appointed as assistant professor of medicine. And then in 2018, I was appointed as professor of medicine and posted in critical care unit. Currently, I am program director of diploma critical care medicine and MD program in critical care medicine. And also I am supervisor for FCPS internal medicine candidates. So Dow University, as you know, is the pioneers university of Pakistan, and a lot of doctors, alumni are working in America, UK, and all over the world. And it's a privilege. I am a Dow graduate, and we have a critical care unit. And in the pandemic of COVID, we have served a lot for the last 18 to 20 months. My unit was made as COVID unit, and I have treated more than 1,000 patients in my critical unit. And Alhamdulillah, many of them are treated well. So currently the unit has been changed. Again, non-COVID medical ICU.
Sir, what is the question? What is the
critically ill patient.
Sir, what is the comment about the current lecture we talked, please, if you would?
So this is a very good lecture. I have 1 to 2 questions from Professor Nuzhat Salamat. You have concluded well that do you think there is a need of training of our physician as hemotherapy, because a lot of physicians, they are not well aware about this field, number 1. Number 2, that we lack the curriculum, medical curriculum of blood transfusion medicine as it should be. So what you want to say?
Rightly pointed out, as I said, if you benchmark our achievements, which we have done since 2008 when we started focusing on this sector, the last, the one which was highlighted in red were pertain to the awareness, education, and practice of clinical blood transfusion. No work has been done on that, except for a few guidelines that were published. And there's a healthcare commission needs to actually look into that deeply. And obviously there are tools and ways to do it. The regulator needs to, build their capacity to address that. But obviously CPSP and other educational institutions should also look into incorporating requirements built in, so that at least at the level of post-graduation, they get sensitized. Otherwise, it should be introduced at the undergraduate level. And I think the PMC curriculum forming committee, they did send us a little bit of draft, and we proposed that it should be introduced from the early part of undergraduate education as well. But certainly it needs a lot of input there.
Yeah, Dr. Nuzhat, I have a couple of questions. As you mentioned that we need just to have a budget of say like 20 billion Pakistani rupees to assure good quality blood availability. Recently we allocated like 250 billion Pakistani rupees for COVID vaccine. I think it's a matter of priorities. And, if you consider the death toll, which is like 25,000, and, here we are considering like it's a critical intervention and it's a matter of priority. But the good news is in a recent meeting with the Health Task Force, I articulated this point of screening the blood with ICT. And, after the webinar, I look forward to your comment and I will put you across directly there, and we can do it immediately in about a few weeks' time. Let me assure you of this thing, because that's something which we can do immediately, because some of those blood banks and the lab, they are charging the money for screening the blood as per ELISA, but actually they are using these old-fashioned where the error is between 40 to 60%. I mean, out of all the intervention, whether it's the postpartum hemorrhage or whatever it is, when you are transfusing and it costs you very little and it has a huge impact, where the carrier rate is staggering between close to 8%. I mean, even the healthy donor and the relative and, the family members who are the primary source, this is something which can immediately be done. And I have a soft commitment from the policymaker that they will do it immediately. So soon after this webinar, I will contact you. I will put you across. Sabah is also there. Sabah Jamal, she's a wonderful professional and she did a lot of work. And I think it's just a matter of tying the knot. So some of these interventions are really so easy and that can be managed so quickly. So the one more and important aspect is fractionation of blood. I think whatever donation we have in Pakistan, that is another issue which you pointed out and rightly pointed it out. We need to involve the industry. We need to open the dialogue to have the fractionation facility available in Pakistan with a population of, 22 crore people. What we are talking about, we don't have any facility. for the fractionation at a commercial scale, but we need to have the, of course, the policy matter, you know, we need to do many steps in that direction. I take this liberty because I'm very close to Pakistani healthcare system as compared to many of my other colleagues on day-to-day basis. So I would like to add that comment. But, you know, may I request you, do we have a really comprehensive step-by-step plan, strategic plan, as you mentioned, in a skeleton, and we see and monitor the progress and the steps which can be taken and which we can take immediately? So I think this APPNA Merit platform, as well as they are going to have a workshop in December, 22nd of December, we are going to meet many of the policymakers. They can articulate this point and they can put it on the agenda item. You know, the impact is huge. In the public health, you have to see the impact. You know, just like vaccination or whatever it is, you know, you have many priorities. You have to give due weightage to each and every priority. And I think blood transfusion stand out very clearly in that. So that's a little bit lengthy comment. I'm sorry for that, but I think that's really very relevant. So I just invite Dr. Sarwat, you know, our colleague and, you know, very active member of APPNA Merit Committee. If he has something to say, please, Dr. Sarwat. Please unmute and, you know, ask question. Dr. Sarwat, are you there? Okay, so Danish?
Sir, I'm here.
Okay, please go ahead.
Gee, first of all, I have to say that Professor Nuzhat's presentation really blew me away, because the quality, the passion, and most of all, she talked about the finances and the difficulties of finances, which really completed her presentation. Really fantastic presentation, mashallah, congratulations. And it also shows professors' commitment to finding the solutions and quantifying the needs of this movement. I personally have visited the blood bank of a major teaching institution in Pakistan, and I cannot tell you how pathetic is not the right word, maybe the worst condition. And you actually really start believing in a higher being which protects the patient, despite the fact that the blood transfusions are so badly maintained. The refrigerators don't work. The people touch the bags with their hands. It's just totally miracle. And one cannot imagine how a smaller district headquarter or Tehsil headquarter hospital, if they have blood transfusion, what condition will there be? And therefore, I think this issue is that of utmost importance, and I will be willing to donate to this cause because it will save lots of lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarwat. It was, I'm grateful for your comments. Certainly, I think one of the reasons that I have highlighted broadly, and one of those plans I have been talking about with the Punjab Blood Transfusion Authority repeatedly, and every forum where I go, I say that we need to just catch hold of this critical area. And not only that, I'm telling them to catch hold, I'm telling them how to do that. And I say that the shortest route to that would be that if you can outsource this activity to a group, that group led by a domain specialist and industry, just give the responsibility to the industry to set up this, one in the north, one in the center, one in the south. This was exactly what I did in armed forces. Last year of my command, when I was there, I fought the case of that we should have a uniform screening standard in the country. And for that, the implementation plan was that let the industry give us a cost per donation. And that should incorporate the logistics, that should incorporate the information management system, and that should incorporate the testing. And we should not be bothered more about that, of delegating this responsibility to public sector for a long, long time. We are not going to crib about that, but we are looking at the solutions. They agreed that this is the most viable model. As a Dr. Zair said, and connection to sensitize to the urgency model, which has been implemented already in one of the armed forces sector, and just emulate it. That's the shortest thing. Secondly, a focus on information management system. Fortunately, we did develop a couple of them. That is, once you implement it and mandate it, then everything can be visible to you. I think these are the two things. And plus, obviously, anybody who's interested to invest in technology, they should. And thirdly, I was amazed at the fact that when I talked to Turkey people, they said we offered one of the industries to set up a blood bank manufacturing plant, and they refused. So you have people who are willing to help, but the industry is not looking at it in that way. Similarly, this holds true for recovered plasma. We are sitting at a huge volumes. At least if you are able to recover this plasma, which country can sell anything from $60 to $100 a liter, and you are sitting in more than 200,000 liters. Even if you just target the thalassemia NGOs and just fund them to give this plasma back in a coordinated place, we can earn a huge amount of foreign exchange from that. There are many solutions that can be collaboratively done, and those people who have interest and who have a capacity, both financially as well as otherwise, they can be done.
Yes, Dr. Sarwar. Yes, continue.
Very quick comment, sir. I think one of the in addition to the quality issue that Dr. Nuzhat also said, there is also a prevailing corruption issue that prevents the government and the people and the private sector to trust in implementing some of the solutions, because they become victim of corruption in our society. And that is unfortunately the curse of corruption that is prevailing all over the country.
Thank you, Professor Sarwar.
For that, we need to go to the consumer. I think in a huge way. In a couple of these experience for last 2 years, 2.5 years I'm doing. I think we need to take that longer route. We need to target the consumer and the patient. We need to make a patient advocacy group so that they highlight it themselves, and we just support them in a big way. And once we are able to sensitize them and educate them, I'm sure this corrupt element can be, easy, said than done. But still, to me, it seems like that's the way forward. Otherwise, if you want to go and reform the public sector, that's probably not our capacity. But we need to go to the consumer.
So we are lucky we have Professor Hassan Abbas Zahir, who is also among the pioneer, and Professor Nuzhat mentioned about him. Dr. Hassan, kindly will you introduce yourself and then you please comment.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say that it was a brilliant presentation from Brigadier Nuzhat as always, and she's raised some very pertinent, important points which the government should pay attention to. And I would also like to thank her for acknowledging my role in implementing the blood safety reforms in the country. And I would also like to add that Brigadier Nuzhat was one of the key national experts, a partner of the Safe Blood Transfusion Program, as well as the Islamabad Blood Transfusion Authority. And she contributed in a big way in developing many technical and policy documents for the program. And I would like to thank her for making all this contribution. Thank you very much.
Dr. Hassan, I think I would just like to remind you that before, in our informal talk before the start of webinar, I was discussing with Professor Nuzhat that you recently invited Dr. Shahzad, and he put the pictures of the regional blood transfusion center in Islamabad, which is state of the art. So we are lucky that we have all the people who took part in blood transfusion safety. And I know it's a very complex and complicated issue, because we need to involve the policymaker. It's a public health issue. We need to involve the industry, as Professor Nuzhat mentioned, that we are sitting on a huge resource of plasma, which can be exported, and it translates into dollar and dime term. It is quite huge. But before that, as she mentioned, this German intervention, I think there was hardly any clue about these things. And Professor Sarwat mentioned the people, they are picking the bag of blood. And, Professor Nuzhat mentioned how the blood is transported and the pilferage from the public health institution. So these are so many issues, but we need to have a complete policy, because when the donor facility is available, when the donor support is available, things are moving. But soon after, when the funds, they are cut off, and the state and the sovereign government, they have to take charge of the situation, and then the thing starts deteriorating. But there should be a comprehensive policy. And I think we can highlight the APPNA Merit Committee during your session in winter session by 22nd of December in Rawalpindi. This is one of the key issue. But maybe we have a good news working with Professor Nuzhat, that before that, we can put the regulation about the use of these kits, because I can involve the DRAP, and that can be taken very quickly. I tell you this thing, because we just need to take your slide. You mentioned about that 20% of the blood is screened on these old-fashioned in far-flung places. So it should be criminal, really. No one can use that. The bare minimum should be ELISA. Of course, NAT testing at this point in time is beyond the financial resource of Pakistan. But of course, what we can do, you should be doing it. So finally, Dr. Danish, you are around. Dr. Danish Bhatti. Dr. Sarwat, you have something to say, please go ahead.
Very quick question from Dr. Nuzhat. What is the cost of setting up fractionation of plasma, and whether that may be something that a merit group can be part of?
Firstly, I would not recommend setting up fractionation plant upfront. We should go through the route of doing a contract fractionation first. So what we can do is initially this critical safety areas have to be addressed, and some organized way of collecting the recovered plasma, and then you export this plasma for contract fractionation. And you can look into involving the already pharma industry, which is present, who can explore fill and finish sort of thing in the existing facility. So once we have secured that much of a volume, then probably we can look into some of the technologies which can look into fractionating the volume that we are going to generate from the country, around 200 to 300,000 liters per year. Because for a bigger fractionation plant, the way they are working, this is a minuscule volume to work on. So that will never be viable for us. So I don't know exactly how much cost this is going to take, but from looking at the Iran's example and other countries, they would it will be much better to go for contract fractionation and fill and finish for bringing that back for our country usage. Or a low volume fractionation like chromatographic and other technologies that are still not mature, but they are in pipeline.
So Professor Nuzhat, we have a question from Mr. Anayatullah Mehman, that he appreciated your talk and said, I have a comment or a query. Though an important factor, but least talk about is ethical issue in blood transfusion. It is not very infrequent practice to wrongly report the screening result for monetary reason. May I request for your kind comment, please? So do you see this practice so common?
There are huge ethical issues around blood transfusion, no doubt about that. both from the practices which are taking place currently in the blood bank sector for all the wrong reasons, obviously, but that has to be incorporated, and there has been incorporated into legislation. For example, the privacy, the consent, and looking into other practices. It's not the matter of having a legislation, it's the implementation of the legislation which is a problem in our country. So once we can implement those things, we have all the things on the papers. It's the implementation. And so is true for ethical. We do have written down, but it's the implementation. But it is an important issue.
I think there is a connection issue with Professor Nuzhat. So her screen is frozen. Thank you very much. So I think we are just dot on time. So, you know, this time we finished absolutely in time. We are really thankful to Professor Nuzhat Salamat, and, you know, she is the lady. I have full faith and trust that she can make the things happen. And real reassurance, Dr. Sarwat, yes, to your point, yes, that is doable. We can discuss with Professor Nuzhat about your idea. And of course, there is an opportunity. And thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Tanvir, for your participation, Dr. Abbas Raza, and all the team, you know, and particularly the Walid, who is the coordinator of this webinar. We are thankful to him. So absolutely, and we are grateful to all the participants and the audience for their patience and listening to the lecture. So these are the key community issues for development reason. You know, it's not a fancy talk. It's absolutely ground level realities back in the country. So we are grateful to all of you for your participation, and we will continue. So thank you very much, and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.